Hello, I am Strategic Gamer here with MTuck. We are Legends of Runeterra players, and we just wanted to make a video talking about the new champions in the Rise of Tides expansion and just some of our thoughts on the meta. So, if you're kind of wondering what to play, this will give you some type of guidance on the decks and strategies that we think are currently good. This is just our impressions. We don't have statistics to back us up. We're recording this right now on May 2nd, and there's going to be a lot of tournaments in the upcoming days, and that'll shed some significant light on whether we're right or wrong, and maybe the meta is going to be something totally different than what we think it is. Through this discussion, we're going to be talking about decks mainly in aggro, combo, and control, and we're going to try to limit our use of the term mid-range, even though a lot of decks fall into the mid-range category. And MTuck is just going to quickly explain the aggro, combo, control triangle. This fits for other card games as well, but depending on your background, this might be a new concept, so it might be important for you to listen, and this might have some good takeaways so that when you make a deck, you can understand which one of these categories your deck falls into, and maybe it falls in between some of these categories, so you can gauge the strengths and weaknesses of your deck. Go ahead, MTuck.
Hey guys, so as you can kind of see on the screen, you'll see aggro, combo, control, and it's aggro beats combo, beats control, and beats aggro. And depending on your background, this might seem a bit different for you than what you're used to. A lot of times you think that aggro should beat control, but in this game, it's very different. Control has a lot of healing. It has a lot of ways to do with aggro where it doesn't have ways to do it. The reason we said we're not going to use the word mid-range a ton is because mid-range has very similar playstyles to aggro. It fits in the same spot as aggro. It's just less extreme. So whereas aggro hard loses to control and hard beats combo, mid-range doesn't lose as hard to control, and it doesn't win as hard against combo. But it still will generally win, and it will still generally lose to combo. So that's generally how we're going to be talking about things. Mid-range will sometimes be in the middle as well, so it sometimes will be like aggro with a combo kind of playstyle to it. This is similar to like the old Yasuo deck that had a control-ish kind of playstyle, but still was ending up trying to beat you with units. So that's kind of the triangle, that's where it's at. And when we talk about decks, we'll be talking about it in terms of aggro, combo, control, and mid-range being a combination of the three.
Right. So we'll still say mid-range occasionally, but when we say mid-range, we'll try to clarify where it fits in the triangle. All right. So now we're going to get into the discussion of champions. So the way we're going to try to format this is we're going to try to go to the champion. We're going to talk about the card itself, the champion strength itself, and then we're going to try to give some ideas on decks where that champion might fit in. And we're just going to do it in order alphabetically, starting with the older or the pre-existing regions, and then we'll go into Bilgewater. So the first champion we're going to talk about is Quinn, and I'll go over these champions a little bit, just what they do, and then I'll give my thoughts, and then MTuck will jump in and share his thoughts on the card, and we may disagree on some of these cards. We don't play the same kind of decks all the time, and we like to argue and go back and forth with one another. So Quinn is a 5-cost 3/4 scout unit, and when Quinn is summoned, you summon Valor. And I'll go to Valor. Valor is a 2-cost 2/1 with Challenger and Scout. And Scout just means that if you attack with only Scout units, they rally for you. They give you another attack token. And then when she sees you attack 4 times, she levels, and she becomes a 4/5. And whenever she attacks, you summon Valor, challenging the strongest enemy. So what Quinn is basically doing a lot of the time is giving you multiple attack triggers, and that's where she's strong. If you're not benefiting off multiple attack triggers, Scout in general is not very strong. And summoning Valor as a 2-1 challenger scout isn't particularly strong, but it does help Quinn stay alive when Quinn is attacking, or other key units stay alive as they're attacking, because the strongest enemy will get taken up by this scout. And then Quinn's spell is Blinding Assault, and that's just, it summons a Valor. And Valor's not a particularly strong 2-drop, even as a spell where you can spend spell mana. MTuck, what are your thoughts on the card itself?
Quinn's really interesting. It was the most underrated card in the releases or the previews. Everyone thought it was going to be terrible. I still don't think it's amazing, but it's definitely the most underrated card. It's done much better than people expected. It's a really, really interesting card. I think having 2 bodies, as always, is really good. Any time you play one card that creates 2, it's always much better than having one card that creates 1. She is slightly understated. I think eventually we might see her go up to a 4/4, to be honest, because she is a bit weak in terms of her. But everyone thought Scout was going to be not that great, and it's turned out to be really, really solid. So all around good card. Not insane. I still foresee a lot of people running Garen over her, but still a very, very solid card.
And do you think that it was Scout that was undervalued, or do you think it was making the 2 bodies that was undervalued?
I think it was comparing her to Garen. It was everyone looked at her and was like, why would I play her over Garen? Garen's just a bigger unit. Most 5-drops can kill her very easily, so if you play her on curve and try to attack with her, you will most of the time just get blocked by another, Hearthguard or something else that's played on curve. At least that was the thought. In practice, what's ended up happening, though, is the Valor gives you control over that. So you can attack with her and Valor, and just make sure Quinn doesn't die. You can also just have Valor attack a specific unit that you want to kill or weaken. There's just a lot of flexibility, which has been giving you a lot of power that you didn't initially think of when you saw the card.
What I see happen a lot is people will play Quinn and attack with Valor and get their Scout trigger and not attack with Quinn. And by getting the Scout trigger and not having to attack with Quinn seems to be a stronger application than I would have initially thought.
We haven't really gotten into the decks yet, but we'll get into it later. But there's a lot of really, really interesting things you can do with Valor in a lot of the decks that play kind of Quinn. I guess he's looking at it right now.
Yeah, I'm moving to the deck right now because, just as our format, we're going to now talk about decks where Quinn fits. And this is the pretty standard list, I would think. Just the MF Quinn aggro deck.
Absolutely. Yeah, this deck is definitely the standard, and kind of going off what I was saying with Valor. One of the things that a lot of people are doing is if you have Quinn and MF on the board, so MF being Misfortune. We haven't talked about Misfortune yet, but basically what Misfortune will do is do 1 damage to anything that is defending when you attack. And we'll go more into that in another video, but that's the general idea of what Misfortune does. And what you can do with Valor is, let's say they have a 1 health unit. Let's say they have an Iceveil Archer on their side, and you really don't want to send your War Chest into it because War Chest will just die. What you can do is, if you have MF on the board, is take your Valor, have him swing into the Iceveil Archer, which is a 3/1, and because MF will do 1 damage to it, Valor will not die, Iceveil Archer will die, and then you still get your attack trigger. So you've done, +1 to Quinn's level up. Misfortune's level up is the same condition, so you've done +1 to Misfortune's level up, and killed one of their units for free. So that's where Valor has become very, very, very useful, is it's an easy way, if you have Misfortune on the board, to just kill off 1 health units whenever you want.
And because of that, I actually have seen a very large decrease in people playing 1 health units in general.
Yeah, 1 health units are definitely in a bad spot this meta. Between MF getting 1 damage pings, Make It Rain being an auto include in every single Bridgewater deck, Make It Rain is the 2-mana spell that does 1 damage to 3 random targets. You have Ember Maiden, who presumably will be in nearly every Freylord deck, who will, again, at the start of every round, will do 1 damage to everything. There's just so many 1 damage pings right now that 1 health units are not doing amazing.
So let's get into why this deck is doing so well. I would argue that this is the most popular deck, and it's one of the most successful decks on the ladder.
No, agreed.
So what I'm seeing for this strength is that against aggro decks, you have one of the best early game curves you can have with Fleetwood Tracker into either Brightsteel Protector or in a lot of cases War Chefs. This deck doesn't include War Chefs, but let me pull War Chefs up. I see it on this card in a lot of versions. So against aggro decks, you're just killing their early units efficiently, and sometimes you're not even losing yours. And if they don't have anything to play, you're getting in a bunch of early damage and gaining tempo.
Yep. Also, you have Loyal Badger Bear, who is like most decks that need to stabilize versus aggro stabilize around turn 4 or 5. This deck stabilizes turn 3 because you play a 4/4 that can trade into anything aggro can throw at you, and it can kill Boom Crew Rookie on its defending turn, which is really strong. Usually Boom Crew Rookie, when played on curve, will always get 2 attacks in, but against Loyal Badger Bear, if they're attacking on odds, Boom Crew Rookie only gets 1 attack in, which is really, really strong.
I have seen a shift in the play style of PZ burn decks because of this change, where people are open attacking more because of Loyal Badger Bear.
They have to. That's the only way you can keep your Boom Crew Rookie alive.
Right, because it's more important to deal the 3 damage with the Boom Crew Rookie from the 1 damage and then the 2 ping than it is to risk them having Badger Bear. Also in this list, there's the Green Fang Warden, and he has a barrier anyway. So if your opponent's just going to drop barriers every turn, well, you might as well open attack while you can and get the damage through.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's really the Loyal Badger Bear and the Grizzled Ranger that's making this deck really insane. This 4/1, some like 1 health is bad, but you get a 4/4 when it dies.
Yeah, people. So me and StrategicGamer are part of the Discord and are pretty vocal in the Discord. For the Reddit, the lore Reddit, and a lot of people were saying that the 4/4, like a vanilla 4/4, wouldn't be that insane. Like, it would be good, but it wouldn't be, game breaking. I think we can say with full certainty that a 4/1 that creates a 4/4 and a 4/4 has completely shifted the meta. It has made this deck go from being like a solid deck around Bannerman to like, who cares about Bannerman? We just want more Badger Bears.
Yeah, when it was spoiled, it looked ridiculous to me. So in card games in general, cost for stats are really important generally. It's a really important balance concept. And when cards break that element of balance, even if they don't do anything else that's unfair, it usually pushes the meta in a different direction, because the baseline power of playable cards at a particular cost slot become reduced and focused around the largest stat for the cost. So at 3, you really need to have 4 attack if you want to trade with a Badger Bear, or you have to be able to deal damage to the Badger Bear initially so that you can trade with it. And that's very difficult to do for 3 cost in other regions. Other cards just don't do that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand the difference between 3 health and 4 health. It's like in this game in particular, so in all card games, there's going to be breakpoints where the differences between certain health points from health X to health X plus 1 will matter differently depending on what removal is in the game. In this game, there's a good amount of removal that does 2 damage, and there's a good amount of removal that does 3 damage. Currently, StrategicGamer is showing you guys a couple of different 3 damage kind of things, 3 damage removals. You have Box, you have Grasp that he showed, you have Get Excited, you have Gotcha from the new set. Ton of different 3 damage removals. Noxus Favor is another one, but 4 damage, the only things that do 4 damage in terms of your removal are going to be Thermo Beam, which only can be used on turn 3 if you have banked spell mana to kill Badger Bear. And is there anything else that does 4 damage? Thermo Beam. In terms of spells, I think that's it.
Yeah,
I guess, yeah, Shatter. That's a bit of a meme, but yeah.
Well, Lux, that's the main way to deal 4 still.
Yep. Outside of those 2, on turn 3, I don't know how you can deal with it. There is a new card in the new set in Bilgewater called Jaw. What is it? It's Jaw something. Jaw Hunters. We might see that become a good counter to it. Because, as we were saying earlier, 1 health units are generally bad because of Misfortune and all the 1 health things. But if they play Badger Bear on 3, that means they don't have Misfortune. So we might see that be a decent counter. But that's the only thing that I can think of that is a good, solid way to deal with Badger Bear on turn 3.
It's also interesting because that dynamic might change play patterns of people passing to see if their opponent will play the Badger Bear.
That dynamic, we're getting a bit off topic, but that dynamic has already happened with the 2-drop in Bilgewater that creates a barrel. That dynamic of passing to see if they'll play the 2-drop and then killing the barrel when they can't use it.
Neat. But you're right. That now is getting quite a bit off topic, so we'll move on now.
But yeah, so overall, Quinn, solid card, solid decks, probably is in one of the tier 1 decks. I don't want to say the best deck because we don't have stats, but it is absolutely in a tier 1 deck right now.
All right, now let's move on to the next champion. Next champion we're going to talk about is Sejuani. Sejuani is a 6-cost 5/6 with Overwhelm, and when you play Sejuani, you give an enemy Frostbite and Vulnerable this round. Vulnerable is a new keyword where the enemy can get challenged by any of your units, so it treats all your units as if they have Challenger for that 1 unit. And to level her, you have to damage the enemy Nexus in 5 different rounds this game. And that doesn't have to be from attacking. Spells work too. And when Sejuani levels, she becomes 6/7 Overwhelm. And when the first time she sees you damage the enemy Nexus each round, she frostbites all enemies. And her spell's actually pretty good. It's Fury of the North. It's Burst Pump, and it gives an ally +4/+4 this round. I think Sejuani baseline is just really strong card for the stats and the ability. Just a 6-cost 5/6 Overwhelm is decent, and when you play her, as long as you have the attack token, you're gonna kill one of the enemy units. And so I think that is a very strong baseline. And then if Sejuani does level, I do think this level condition is pretty difficult. Frostbiting all enemies is even stronger than it looks on the card. Because Sejuani has Overwhelm, if she attacks first and the enemy that blocks her doesn't have 6 or more health, she will deal the Overwhelm damage to the enemy Nexus and then Frostbite all the other enemies that your opponent controls. And that'll make sure that your other units don't trade. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the Sejuani is interesting. So, one important concept in Legends of Runeterra when it comes to champions is building costs. Or deck building costs. So, like, do you have to build around this champion or do you not? So there's 2 kind of general ways you can look at Sejuani. You can look at her as a build around. So you go all in on the idea of I want to damage the Nexus 5 times so I can level her up, and then from turn 6 forward I control the board. I think that generally will be a bad way to look at her, and looking at her as just a generic 6-drop that is a strong 6-drop. That if she levels is great, but it's not really all about leveling her, is going to be very, very solid. slotting her in basically to the old Ash decks should be really solid. Kind of the old Ash decks didn't really have much to do turn 6 onward. If I'm remembering correctly, it was pretty much just harsh winds and control with Ash until you get a good Ash attack off. So it'll give Ash a bit more late game, which is kind of nice. So yeah, I think she'll be a solid slot in for that deck. I think she's a all-around good card. Gives you a bit of board control. But yeah, going all in on the level up is probably not the way to go.
Also, unlike the Yasuo decks, Ash decks didn't have like a strong unit late game that had Frostbite on it, and Sejuani kind of fills that niche.
No, it's true. Being able to one of the big issues with the Ash decks was that if you didn't kill them by about turn 6 or 7 with a big Ash swing, you probably weren't going to kill them, because they would end up outvaluing you with either just bigger units, or if it was a control deck or a combo deck, they'd get to their kind of outvaluing point with control, or their combo and combo off with combo. So having something that you can do that is impactful for the mana point you're at turn 6 and 7 and even 8 is really, really useful.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference to the deck's ability to go later into the game. Although Ash Sejuani decks end up being aggro, they fall into a little bit of the mid-range category, where they're trying to go a bit later, and they're trying to set up some combos that can win the game also. For example, just setting up leveled Ash, making all the enemies have 0 power. So now we'll talk about the deck and where we think it fits in the meta, those kind of concepts. So this is an Ash Sejuani list that MTuck and I sort of just threw together. I don't currently own any Sejuani, so I don't have Sejuani listed down here, but she is in the deck. Generally, when you're playing Frostbite, you're looking to win unit versus unit combat on the board. So traditionally, these decks have been very strong against the Demacia decks, the Bannerman style decks. And I think we'll see the same thing here. The only problem, which is the Loyal Badge Bearer, because it has 4 health, Brittle Steel doesn't hit it. And that's just sort of a little odd that they made that kind of design decision. Sort of shifts a little bit of the power away from Freylord countering Demacia. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a bit interesting, because you have some ways to deal with it. Like you can chump block with an Omen Hawk if we stick with Omen Hawk. Chump block the Badger Bear, and then from that point on, you can Brittle Steel it, because it's not like you have anything that can do 4 damage anyway. So that might be the way you have to deal with it. But yeah, it is really weird. I don't particularly like you could. I mean, I don't think this will be the case, but we could see maybe Brittle Steel get cut, and maybe Flash Freeze, which is the 3 mana freeze anything at burst speed. We might see that get slot in instead. It just depends on how focused on countering Demacia this list has to be. In tournaments, this deck has always been a anti Demacia deck. So I foresee it staying that way. I don't think this list will be good in ladder against anything else. It loses to control. It is 50-50 with aggro, like with the extremely aggressive decks that try to win fast. And it also loses to combo. But it beats Bannerman so hard that it was ran in tournaments and with great success. A lot of people who won specifically the Duels of Runeterra tournaments were running some version of Freylord Noxus because of how hard it countered the Demacia decks.
And sort of some interesting evolutions and changes that have been made to this deck from what I've played against on ladder. Just going over some of the new cards. Ruthless Raider is seeing play in this deck. It has 1 health, but it has tough. So that's a big deal. It survives all the ping, and this card's just super annoying when people are playing like hapless aristocrats and other just small dudes to block early game.
It also doesn't die to your Ember Maiden, which is kind of nice.
Let's see, all regions. But yeah. And it doesn't die to Ember Maiden. That's very true. Ember Maiden's very good against all the swarmy decks. So this deck used to be kind of weak against decks that sort of wanted to chump block. Well, now you can't really play a bunch of make bad units and block. Brood Awakening doesn't really work.
Yeah, on top of that, because of the toughness point in Ruthless Raider, when this buff has a lot of buffs, or this deck has a lot of buffs, as we're kind of going to be looking through. You have Omen Hawk, you have Shared Spoils, which we'll get more into in a minute. You have Hearthguard, which we're all familiar with. Basically, a ton of buff cards that are trying to buff up your deck. And it makes the toughness so much stronger. The difference between 1 health and toughness and 2 health and toughness is massive, because it survives basically two damage removals, be it through units or spells. If you can get it up to a 5/3 with toughness, it'll survive against all common removal. It's actually better than 4 health. 3 health with toughness is better than 4 health, because it will survive more removal. Basically every buff on this card drastically increases how good it is, compared to like just a generic vanilla 4/4 or a generic 3/1 or even 3/2.
I agree. Tough, I sort of view it as at least 1.5 extra health or 2 extra health, and tough makes this card way harder to kill than it initially looks. But getting into the buffs, Omen Hawk is still here. It's just a solid 1-drop. Yeah, its stats are bad, but really you can view it, if you play it on turn 1, as a 1-cost 3/3 sort of, and that's just very strong.
Yeah,
very
it's
consistent value.
It's still probably the best 1-drop in the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably still the best 1-drop in the game. And then Shared Spoils is a new card that Freylord got, and I think it's arguably the best card that they got, which is surprising because everybody thought Ember Maiden was going to be super awesome and popular and strong. But it seems like the meta has shifted, where Shared Spoils is really taking the spotlight as the best Freylord card so far. And because it grants the top 3 units +1/+1, and when you plunder, you draw one of them. So it's sort of like Omen Hawk.
It's 3 Omen Hawks, like, or 2 Omen Hawks. Sorry,
Yeah.
Omen Hawks top 2.
Yeah.
But still, like, it's pretty insane. You see it being ran in elusives as well. The traditional, everyone knows it by this point. The Ionia Freylord elusives deck. You don't need to pull it up. It's
Okay.
a very well known deck. It's been tier 1 or high tier 2 for the last month and a half.
Yeah.
But it's seeing slot-ins in that deck because it's just such a crazy spell. For 2 mana, which you can use in your spell mana. So if you don't have Omen Hawk turn 1, and that's A-okay, spell mana is great. You can potentially get a draw and 3 units buffed up for 2 mana. That's crazy. That's a crazy card. Love it. Absolutely love it.
And then still running the same mid-game package, running the Trappers. Trappers just been very good since the buff.
A lot of decks were actually not running Trapper in a dedicated Ash list because it doesn't really add to the Frostbite package. The reason we kind of put it in this list, usually you run Trapper in a Yeti's deck, and you don't run Trapper in a non-Yeti's deck with Freylord. The reason we've included it is because a 1-mana 5/5, even if it comes out on turn 5, which is when on average it will come out, versus the current Demacia list, it's very, very solid. Because this deck's job is to beat Demacia, generally speaking, in the meta, a 5/5 for 1 mana does that very well. It deals with Quinn. It deals with Garen, assuming Garen doesn't get any buffs from Cythria or anything like that. So it deals with their kind of core cards. It trades well into Cythria. I mean, it's 5 damage on Cythria for 1 mana. So it still trades well into Cytheria. It's generally just a really solid way to deal with the current Bannerman deck.
And because of the way the meta has evolved, these decks are running Reckoning now, and just having a 1-cost 5/5 you can play down and then play Reckoning is very strong. It gives you access to a cheap unit that turns on Reckoning instead of requiring a unit survive.
Yeah, I think the key with that is that you have not just a cheap unit, but a unit that's hard to remove. I mean, 5 health is not easy to remove. And it's a unit that you're not actually that sad if they remove. Whereas, like, beforehand, they were, like, you'd be using it with Ashe, or you'd be using it with the 5/1 from Noxus. And 5/1 with Noxus is easy to remove, just any removal. And with Ashe, if you use it on it with Ashe, you kind of feel a bit bad if they, like, end up, get exciting your Ashe. Like, that's like, dang it, I kind of wanted that card. Whereas if they happen to, like, let's say Will of Ionia your Yeti, cool, I'll replay it for 1 minute. Like,
that's true. Sometimes
it's
you
still
gotta
like
do it, but it's
still a counter, but it's not like a bad counter. Like, that's okay. I'm okay with taking that trade.
yeah. And just to point out, if people aren't familiar with this deck, the reason you want to run all these buffs is so that Trifarian Assessor has 5 attack. So when you play Trifarian Assessor, you're always drawing 1 extra from the body itself.
Yeah, just in general, Trifarian Assessor, the more buffs you have, the more cards you draw, which is traditionally this card's weak point, is not having card draw. This fixes that. So the more cards you draw, the more gas you have in your deck, which basically means the longer you can go without running out of cards. And if this card gets like a 3 draw from Trifarian Assessor, it can be really strong.
Right. So the way you're trying to win the late game, because this deck's going to top out at 6 with Sejuani, it is through Trifarian Assessor, through Bajurg, and you're just going to have more cards that are strong late game, and you're going to rely on the combo potential of Ashe and Sejuani to frostbite the enemy board.
And then with like this deck traditionally, as StrategicGamer was saying, with Ashe, if you so like just a tip for people just trying out this deck, the biggest thing you want to be able to do is keep track of your Ashe's level up. Usually with Frostbite, you want to use it during the attack phase, except with Ashe. Let's say your Ashe is at like 3 out of 5 stacks, and you have Harsh Winds in your hand. You actually will want to Harsh Winds before you attack, because that'll flip your Ashe. It'll make it so the things that you Harsh Winds can't block because of her ability, and it'll make it so your attack now has not just like gets in with the leveled up Ashe, but it gets in with the leveled up Ashe without them being able to chump block you. Because if you wait to use your Harsh Winds during combat, the things will get Harsh Winds. You'll kill them, but you won't get your damage in. You'll just kill some units, which is nice, but you want to be winning when you level up Ashe, not just killing some units.
Right. Knowing when your deck in general deals damage and how many attack phases it deals damage in is helpful in Legends of Runeterra, and Ashe decks do the majority of their damage in 1 or 2 combat steps.